I'm going to share with you what I believe is the greatest archaeological discovery of all time, and this is none other than the Dead Sea Scroll. For the first time in the history of archaeology, AI has successfully reconstructed a scorched Dead Sea Scroll without ever laying a hand on the artifact itself, using ultrafine X-ray scanning and virtual unwrapping algorithms. It slipped through layer after layer of carbon to recover traces of ink long thought lost. And yet, the message carried by the scroll overturned every expectation. The real astonishment did not lie in the words themselves, but in the eerie perfection of the invisible blank spaces across the parchment. Spaces that matched medieval manuscripts with unsettling precision. So, what could have led ancient scribes to repeat those unseen gaps on parchment with such extraordinary care? Let us search for the answer. The absolute physical constraint. On a day in May 1970, at En-Gedi, a lush oasis on the shore of the Dead Sea, an excavation team opened the Holy Ark of a synagogue dating to the late Roman period. Within that sacred wall niche, they should have found treasured Torah, scrolls, but what awaited them was not a carefully preserved library of scripture. Instead, they discovered several blackened masses, crushed and polished by fire. They were no longer parchment. They had become charcoal. Early reports described the team's dismay as they realized that the most sacred written legacy of this community seemed to have been destroyed beyond recovery. The problem was not simply that the scrolls had burned. The heat of the fire, which struck sometime around the 6th century CE, had done something even worse. It had melted the gelatin within the animal skin, fusing the separate layers of parchment into a single solid mass, permanently bonded together. This was an absolute physical constraint. An ordinary scroll is made of distinct surfaces rolled together in sequence, but this object had lost that nature entirely. It was no longer a collection of layers. It had become a single carbon monolith. The conservators of the time were forced to face a brutal truth. No mechanical method could separate those layers. Any attempt to pry open the surface would trigger a chain reaction, shattering the more fragile sheets beneath and reducing the entire relic to an unrecognizable heap of dust. Their only option was to do nothing. The largest charred fragment was carefully wrapped, placed in the archives of the Israel Antiquities Authority, and largely forgotten for more than 4 decades. It was no longer seen as a text that still held information, but simply as a tragic artifact, a physical witness to permanent loss. For an entire generation of archaeologists, the case was closed. The knowledge inside it had been condemned by its own material form, locked within a prison of carbon with no way out. The digital excavation. It was not until the early 21st century that a team of scientists at the University of Kentucky, led by Professor Brent Seals, began approaching the problem from an entirely different angle. They asked a fundamental question. If the object could not be touched, could it perhaps be seen through? The answer did not come from traditional archaeology, but from medical physics. The first step in this digital excavation was the use of a technology known as X-ray micro-CT. In essence, it is an extremely high-resolution CT scanner, often used in materials laboratories, capable of capturing thousands of X-ray slices of an object from every angle. The result was not a flat image, but an immense 3-dimensional block of data, a precise map of the density of every tiny point of matter, known as a voxel, inside the carbonized mass. For the first time, scientists held a perfect virtual model of the destruction itself, allowing them to rotate it, slice through it, and peer inside without causing any physical harm. But this map revealed only the internal shape. The real challenge still lay ahead. How could those tightly compressed and distorted layers be flattened within that virtual space? This was where artificial intelligence took on its central role. Seals and his team developed a series of complex algorithms in a process they called virtual unwrapping. What matters here is that the AI was not reading anything at this stage. Its first task was segmentation. It scanned through the 3D data, searching for even the slightest shifts in density in order to identify the ghostly boundaries between layers of parchment that had once existed, like a geologist tracing seams of rock beneath the earth. The AI carefully mapped the virtual surface of each rolled layer, reconstructing its warped shape in three-dimensional space. Once the surface of a virtual layer had been identified, the AI moved to its second task, searching for ink. The ink used in ancient texts from Judea often contained metal compounds, especially iron. Those metals are denser and absorb more X-rays than carbon-based parchment. The AI was trained to inspect the virtual surface it had just created and detect voxels with unusually high density. These brighter points in the scan were the ghostly traces of writing ink. The AI did not see letters. It saw only a pattern of dense points. In the final step, the algorithm mathematically flattened that warped surface and projected the ink traces onto it. The entire process was not an interpretation. It was a cold and exact physical reconstruction. What appeared on the screen was a perfect digital copy of a physical reality destroyed long ago. A page unseen by human eyes for nearly 1,500 years. The precision of empty space. After many months of data processing, the first image from inside the Ein-Gedi scroll finally came into view. Just as scholars had predicted, ancient Hebrew letters appeared with remarkable clarity. The text was identified as the first two chapters of Leviticus, the third book of the Hebrew Bible, and as a testament to the care of ancient scribes. Its content matched the Masoretic text exactly, word for word. The standard form of the Hebrew Bible, established centuries later in the medieval period. In that first moment, the researchers felt a wave of relief. The technology had worked. The text had been recovered. This could have been a happy ending. A story of human perseverance overcoming the destruction of time. Early reports focused on the match in content, praising it as proof of the continuity of Jewish tradition. It seemed that the greatest mystery had already been solved. But as experts began to examine the deeper structure of the reconstructed text, a sense of unease began to creep in. Its perfection was not merely admirable, it also felt strangely unnatural. How could they trust what an algorithm was telling them? So, they tested it. In the sections of the scroll that AI had reconstructed clearly, they compared each letter against the standard text. The result was a perfect match. Then they moved to the damaged sections. The AI proposed the following conclusion based on the remaining ink traces and the structure of the sentence. There was a 99% probability that the missing character was an aleph. Specialists in ancient script then checked the result using traditional methods and confirmed the AI's conclusion. Again and again, the system proved its astonishing accuracy. The machine had earned its credibility, and it was precisely because of that trust that the next discovery became so shocking. The focus of the investigation shifted away from what was written and toward the physical structure of the text itself. Our attention now turns to the high-resolution reconstruction produced by AI. The letters are arranged with perfect order, but what matters even more lies between them. These are the blank spaces, the physical silences left behind to separate passages. In handwritten copying traditions, such spacing is usually an artistic or practical feature. It may vary according to the skill of the scribe, the quality of the parchment, or even the school in which he was trained. It is a human variable. Empty space is noise, an unavoidable byproduct of manual work. But thanks to the verified precision of AI, researchers were for the first time able to measure these invisible spaces with complete confidence. And this was the moment when an inexplicable truth emerged. Not only had the letters been copied with near-perfect physical accuracy, but even the blank spaces with no ink at all matched standard manuscripts copied by hand more than 800 years later, both in position and in size. What does that mean? In paleography, specialists rely on small differences, the individual traits of a scribal hand, to determine date, origin, and sometimes even the identity of the scribe. Variation is the fingerprint of history, but the Ein-Gedi scroll seems to bear almost no fingerprint at all. Its rigid consistency, even in details as seemingly minor as the spacing between passages, suggests a level of control far beyond what manual copying is supposed to achieve. This is the turning point in the entire investigation. The perfection of the letters, however astonishing, can still be explained by a strict copying tradition and the extraordinary discipline of scribes. But the perfect replication of physical empty space across 8 centuries is something close to absurd. A scribe may remember a word, but how could generations of different scribes, living in different places, remember and reproduce the exact position of an absence down to the millimeter? It suggests that the blank space was not the absence of information. It was information itself, a physical datum governed with rigid precision. This scroll treated noise as part of the signal. At that moment, the original belief that the mystery lay in the written words collapsed completely. The true mystery lay somewhere no one had expected to find it, in the carefully measured silence between the words, the anomalous specimen. To understand just how deeply unusual the Ein-Gedi scroll truly is, we must place it within the broader context of the greatest discoveries in the region, the Dead Sea Scrolls found in the caves of Qumran. These scrolls, slightly earlier in date, revealed a vivid and at times chaotic textual world. When modern AI algorithms are applied to the Qumran scrolls, they produce a rich map of human intervention. AI detects subtle shifts in ink pressure, revealing moments when a scribe paused or hesitated. It identifies small variations in the shape of the same letter, exposing the imprint of multiple scribes working on the same text. It flags passages with unusual grammatical structures, suggesting layers of revision and editing across generations. In this way, AI confirms what scholars have long understood. These were living texts, bearing the scars of evolution. Artificial intelligence does this through a field known as stylometry, the measurement of writing style. By analyzing thousands of variables, from the curve of a pen stroke to the average spacing between words, to the frequency of certain recurring phrases, AI can build what is known as a stylometric profile for each scribe. In the Qumran scrolls, it reveals a complex pattern of overlapping profiles, undeniable evidence of collaboration, debate, and change over time. It is the DNA of a text still in the process of becoming, full of mutations and genetic diversity. That diversity is not limited to copying errors alone. Scholars have found different versions of the same book, with passages rearranged, words altered, and even additions absent from the standard biblical text. The textual world of Qumran was a complex ecosystem, where multiple traditions overlapped and competed, and it is precisely this apparent disorder that makes the scrolls so valuable, because it gives us a glimpse into the human process of shaping a canon. Now, place beside them the reconstructed image of the Ein-Gedi scroll. The contrast is almost shocking. When the same AI algorithm analyzes the Ein-Gedi scroll, it returns an almost empty result. The statistical level of variation in letter forms is nearly zero. Its stylometric profile is disturbingly flat, as if it had been written by a single entity, one that never tired and never altered its style. There is no evidence of correction, no sign of multiple scribes. Its virtual surface is completely clean, sterile. It carries none of the physical signature of a human manual copying process. It looks more like a print than a manuscript. This contrast forces us to confront a deeply unsettling possibility. What if we have misunderstood the entire story? Scholars have long assumed that the diversity of Qumran was typical for that period, but the perfection of the Ein-Gedi scroll suggests the opposite. Perhaps Qumran was not a representative library at all, but a kind of textual graveyard, a place where non-standard versions were stored, variants cast aside from an extremely strict and orthodox line of transmission. Perhaps the chaos we see at Qumran is not evidence of creative freedom, but evidence of a ruthless process of purification taking place elsewhere, a process of which the Ein-Gedi scroll may be the final product. Its existence raises an unsettling question. Could the picture of the chaotic textual world painted by Qumran be only part of the story? Could there have existed, alongside that organic and flexible tradition, another tradition entirely, one inorganic, absolute, and silent, operating with an almost non-human precision? If so, where did that tradition come from? Who created it? And who enforced its rules with such iron discipline? This comparison, carried out by the same objective AI tool, points to a crucial truth. The Ein-Gedi scroll was not the product of the same tradition. It seems to emerge from an entirely different philosophy of information. In physical terms, it is an anomalous specimen, something that obeys a system of rules allowing not even the slightest deviation. We are no longer simply looking at two ancient texts. We are confronting physical evidence of two fundamentally different systems of storing information. One organic, in which humans interact with the text, and one inorganic, in which information exists in an absolute state. And where that second system came from remains a question that traditional archaeology cannot answer. An unchanging blueprint. Our investigation began with a simple question. What could AI read from a dead mass of charcoal? But it has led us toward a far deeper and more disturbing one. What forced ancient scribes to reproduce, down to the millimeter, the invisible blank spaces across the surface of the Getty scroll? We have seen that this alignment cannot be explained convincingly by tradition or by human skill alone. Physical precision on this level demands another kind of control, one that is almost absolute. That leaves us to consider another possibility. If both the letters and the blank spaces were locked into an unchanging physical template, then perhaps we have misunderstood the basic function of this object. Perhaps it was not simply a text created for human reading. Perhaps it was something else entirely. A physical blueprint, a structure of information whose integrity depended on the exact replication of every component, including the position of every particle of ink, and even the places where ink was absent, like a genetic circuit. Even the smallest alteration could damage the whole structure in that scenario. The scribes were not authors or editors. They were instruments of replication, carrying out a strict protocol they may not even have fully understood. They were not simply copying a story. They were reproducing an object, preserving a structure. Perhaps it took a non-human intelligence, an algorithm concerned only with patterns and data, to recognize that this ancient information system also seems designed to remove the human element. The very tool we use to look into the past, an AI without emotion and without bias, may be the only thing capable of recognizing a pattern that itself appears to have been created by a similar logic. Consider the implications of that. If such a blueprint truly existed, it would mean that the ancient world made a conscious and systematic effort to create a channel of transmission with absolute fidelity, one immune to human interpretation and human error. What was the purpose of such a channel? What kind of information was it carrying that demanded such an extreme level of protection? Its existence challenges one of our most basic assumptions, that history is always a process of change and adaptation. It hints instead at the existence of a constant, an unchanging anchor set within the chaotic flow of time. The real message that defies expectation in the Getty scroll, then, does not lie in the content of Leviticus. It lies in the physical existence of the scroll itself, evidence of an ancient copying system that operated with discipline and precision modern science still cannot explain. There may once have been a physical source code, an original master template guarded with extraordinary care. And the Getty scroll may have been only one of many perfect copies distributed across generations. In its effort to decode the past, artificial intelligence did more than simply read a text. It revealed a hidden operating system behind that text. It uncovered traces of an ancient technology for storing information, one rooted in the permanence of matter. We do not yet have a final answer, but one thing is certain. We can no longer return to the simple belief that this was merely an old, burned book. It was something else, something more precise, and something more unsettling.